A bully picked on a quiet single dad at a coffee shop. One move changed everything on a quiet morning in a small coffee shop. No one noticed the man sitting in the corner, his hand trembling as he stirred cold coffee. He was a single father used to being ignored. Until the bully walked in, voice loud with mockery, shoving chairs, humiliating him before the crowd. Every eye turned, waiting for him to bow his head. But one calm action made the entire room go silent, and everyone's fate changed. Henry Caldwell sat where he always sat, in the far corner of Riverside Coffee. The table nearest the restroom, where the light was dim, and people rarely looked. He was 36 years old, but carried himself like someone much older. Shoulders curved inward, eyes fixed on the chipped ceramic mug between his calloused hands. His jacket was worn at the elbows, the fabric threadbare enough that you could see the white t-shirt underneath when he moved. The backpack at his feet was faded from years of sun and rain, held together at one corner with duct tape he had applied so carefully, it looked almost intentional. He had been coming to this coffee shop for nearly 3 years, always ordering the same thing, always sitting in the same spot, always leaving without speaking to anyone. The regulars knew him only as the quiet guy who never made trouble. The baristas knew he tipped in coins counted carefully from his palm, never bills. Always exact change that he would separate meticulously before approaching the counter. The college students knew he was the man who would silently clean up their spilled sugar packets without complaint, who would push in chairs they left scattered, who would wipe down tables no one asked him to touch. Henry was invisible in the way that broken things become invisible, noticed only when someone tripped over them or needed them moved out of the way. He would arrive at 11:30 each morning, order a small black coffee that he would nurse for 3 hours, sitting with perfect stillness, except for the occasional mechanical stirring motion. He never pulled out a phone, never opened a book, never looked at anyone directly. Just sat there, existing in the smallest possible space, as if apologizing for taking up oxygen. His daughter was the only reason he came here at all. Louisa was 8 years old, small for her age, with serious brown eyes that saw too much, and hair she insisted on braiding herself, even though the loops were always uneven. She would finish school at 3:15, and Henry would pick her up with a paper bag containing one-day-old croissant from the bakery next door. It was their ritual, sacred and unchanging. The croissant cost 60 cents less than a fresh one, and Louisa never asked why they always tasted a little stale, never complained about the hard edges or the way the chocolate chips had lost their sweetness. She would split it with him on the walk home, chattering about her day while he listened with absolute attention. And for those 15 minutes, Henry felt almost whole. She was the reason Henry endured the stares, the whispers, the occasional cruel comment about his threadbare clothes, or his persistent silence. She was the reason he swallowed his pride every single day, let insults slide off him like water, accepted condescension and mockery as if it were his due. Because if he caused trouble, if he raised his voice, if he did anything that drew the wrong kind of attention, he risked losing the fragile stability he had built for them both. A single father with no family, no safety net, living paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment where the heat only worked half the time and the landlord had stopped returning calls about the leak in the bathroom ceiling. One wrong move, one police report, one incident that could be twisted into evidence of instability, and social services might decide Louisa deserved better than a father who could barely keep them fed. So he stayed quiet. He stayed invisible. He kept his head down and his fists unclenched, no matter how badly his jaw ached from biting back words that wanted to escape, no matter how often he had to grip the edge of the table to keep his hands from shaking with suppressed anger. The coffee shop was small, the kind of place where conversations carried across the room whether you wanted to hear them or not. Exposed brick walls that had been painted and repainted until the texture was lost, mismatched furniture purchased from estate sales and thrift stores. String lights that gave everything a falsely warm glow and made the shadows in the corners even darker. It attracted a specific crowd, freelancers typing on laptops while pretending to work, elderly couples sharing newspapers and comfortable silence, college students rehearsing presentations to audiences of friends who were not really listening. And occasionally people like Clinton Hayes who came not for the coffee but for the opportunity to feel superior. Clinton walked in like he owned the place. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in clothes that announced money without subtlety. Expensive watch, designer sneakers, a gym membership body, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He was 42 years old, worked in sales for a pharmaceutical company, and treated most interactions like transactions he was winning. He had noticed Henry months ago, the way a shark notices wounded prey. At first, it was small things. A comment about Henry's coffee order. A joke about his jacket. A laugh that lasted too long when Henry fumbled his change. Then it escalated, knocking into Henry's chair as he passed, asking loudly if Henry was homeless, making bets with his colleagues about whether Henry could afford lunch. Today, Clinton was in a particularly good mood. He had closed a major deal that morning, and cruelty came easily when he felt powerful. He spotted Henry immediately, hunched over his usual table, and his smile widened. The shop went quiet in the way spaces do when violence is about to happen. Not physical violence yet, but the kind that draws blood without leaving marks. Clinton walked over, each step deliberate. He stopped directly beside Henry's table, close enough that his shadow fell across the worn wood. Henry did not look up. His fingers tightened around the mug until his knuckles went white, but he did not look up. "Well, well," Clinton said, his voice carrying across the small space. "If it isn't our resident charity case." A few people glanced over, then quickly away. No one ever intervened. They never did. Henry's jaw clenched. His eyes stayed fixed on the table. He could feel Louisa's drawing in his jacket pocket, the one she had made last night with crayons borrowed from the library. A stick figure family. Her, him, and a dog they could not afford. She had written "My hero, Daddy" across the top in wobbly letters. He thought of that drawing now. He thought of her waiting for him at 3:15. He thought of how she would ask about his day, and he would smile and say it was fine, and she would believe him because she was 8 and still thought her father was invincible. Clinton reached out and deliberately knocked Henry's coffee mug, sending it skidding across the table. The liquid sloshed over the rim, pooling near Henry's phone. "Oops," Clinton said, his voice dripping with false apology. "Guess you'll have to clean that up." "Oh, wait, you're probably used to cleaning up after people, aren't you?" "That's all guys like you are good for." Someone's phone was recording now. Henry could see it in his peripheral vision. The tiny red light of a camera. Someone else was watching with poorly concealed amusement. The barista looked uncomfortable, but did not move from behind the counter. Henry slowly reached for a napkin. His hand shook, not from fear, but from the tremendous effort of holding himself perfectly still, of keeping his breathing even, of not letting his training take over, the muscle memory that lived deeper than thought, that knew exactly how to neutralize a threat in under 3 seconds. He wiped the spilled coffee. He did not speak. Clinton laughed. It was a harsh sound, meant to humiliate. "Look at this guy. Pathetic. Bet you don't even have a real job, do you? Just sitting here all day, taking up space, hoping someone will feel sorry for you." The words landed like punches. Henry's throat burned with everything he could not say. But he kept wiping the table, mechanical, automatic, invisible. Around them, the coffee shop had become an arena. People were watching openly now, some with pity, some with contempt, some with the blank fascination humans reserve for suffering that is not their own. No one stood up. No one said stop. They just watched, and their silence was its own kind of violence. Henry had learned to disappear inside himself during moments like this. It was a skill he had developed over the past 3 years, since Rachel died and the world had revealed its true face. He would go somewhere else in his mind, somewhere quiet, where cruel words could not follow. But today, something was different. Today, his daughter's drawing pressed against his ribs like a talisman. Today, he could feel the weight of every person's stare like a physical pressure. Today, the shame was suffocating in a way it had never been before. Clinton shoved Henry's chair with his foot, making it scrape loudly against the floor. "Hey, I'm talking to you, deadbeat. Don't you have any self-respect left, or did you lose that along with everything else?" Henry closed his eyes. "Just breathe. Count to 10. Think of Louisa. Do not react. Do not give them ammunition. Do not become the problem." But beneath the surface, beneath the careful control, something ancient and dangerous was stirring. Something he had buried so deeply, he almost believed it had died. What no one in Riverside Coffee knew, what Henry had never spoken about, was that 12 years ago, he had been someone else entirely. Before Rachel, before fatherhood, before he learned that love could strip you of everything you thought made you strong. He had been Staff Sergeant Henry Caldwell, United States Army, with 2 tours in hostile territory, and a reputation for staying ice-cold under fire. He had trained soldiers in close-quarters combat. He had taught hand-to-hand defensive tactics to people whose lives depended on reaction speed. He had certifications in 3 martial arts disciplines and reflexes that still woke him at night, ready to fight enemies that were not there. He had been dangerous. Controlled, disciplined, but dangerous. Then Rachel had gotten pregnant, and everything had shifted. She had looked at him one night, her hand on her growing belly, and said, "I need you to choose. I need to know you'll choose us." And he had. Without hesitation. He had left the military, found work as a mechanic, built a quiet life that had nothing to do with violence. When she died giving birth to Louisa, something in him had broken completely. The doctor said it was an undetected heart condition, a tragedy no one could have prevented. But Henry blamed himself for not being enough, for not protecting her, for failing the one mission that truly mattered. So he had shrunk himself down to almost nothing. He had taken low-paying jobs that did not require references. He had moved to a neighborhood where rent was cheap and questions were few. He had become invisible, because invisible men could not lose anyone else. For 3 years, he had not thrown a punch, had not raised his voice, had not let the old training surface even once. Because he was terrified of what he might become if he let himself remember how to fight. Terrified that if he opened that door even a crack, he would lose control of the rage that sat coiled in his chest like a sleeping beast. He told himself it was strength, this restraint. That real courage was enduring humiliation for his daughter's sake. That violence solved nothing. But deep down, in the place he did not examine, he knew he was just afraid. Afraid that if he stood up for himself, the world would take Louisa away as punishment. Afraid that he did not deserve to be strong, because strength had not saved Rachel. Afraid that he was exactly what Clinton said he was, pathetic, broken, less than. The truth no one understood was that Henry's silence was not weakness. It was the thinnest possible membrane holding back something much worse. And today, that membrane was beginning to tear. Clinton was still talking, his voice rising. "You know what your problem is? You're a waste of space. A complete failure. I bet you've got some sob story, right? Some excuse for why you're such a loser?" Henry's breathing had changed. Slower now. Deeper. Died on. His shoulders had stopped curving inward. The trembling in his hands had stopped entirely. Something was happening. Something small but unmistakable. The air in the room felt different. Then Clinton made his final mistake. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a child's drawing, bright with marker and crayon, edges crumpled from being carried in a small backpack. Louisa's drawing. The one she had given Henry last week. The one he kept in his pocket always. Clinton must have grabbed it when Henry was distracted, or perhaps it had fallen during an earlier encounter. It did not matter how he got it. What mattered was that he held it now, smirking, and everyone in the coffee shop could see exactly what he was about to do. "What's this?" Clinton said loudly, holding the drawing up. Did the little loser make his daddy a picture? How sweet. The drawing showed 2 stick figures holding hands. Louisa had written, "I love you, Daddy. You're the strongest," in purple crayon. Clinton laughed. Strongest? This guy? That's hilarious. Kid must be as deluded as her old man. He crumpled the paper, slowly, making sure Henry watched every movement. "Maybe I should throw this away for you. Do everyone a favor and get rid of the trash." And that was when Henry looked up. The change was so sudden, so complete, that the people nearest to him actually flinched. His eyes, which had been dull and defeated seconds before, were now cold and clear and absolutely focused. His body, which had seemed diminished, now filled the space differently. He did not look bigger, exactly, but he looked solid, immovable, like gravity had shifted around him. He stood up, slowly, every movement measured and precise. There was no rush, no panic, no visible anger, just mechanical efficiency, like a machine activating after years of dormancy. The chair scraped against the floor with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the suspended silence. Henry unfolded himself from the table, and the transformation was so complete that it seemed impossible this was the same man who had been hunched there moments before. His spine straightened, his shoulders squared, his head came up, and the angle of his chin changed everything about his face. Clinton's smile faltered. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face like a candle flame in wind. Some primitive part of his brain, the part that evolution had designed to recognize predators, was screaming that he had miscalculated badly, that the prey had just revealed itself to be something else entirely. "Give me the drawing," Henry said. His voice was quiet, barely above conversational volume. Not threatening, not pleading, just factual, the way someone might observe that rain was falling. But it carried in the small space like a physical thing, like a change in air pressure before a storm. "Or what?" Clinton blustered, but his voice had lost its edge. The confidence that had carried him through 1,000 petty cruelties was evaporating. "You going to do something about it, tough guy? You going to hit me? Go ahead. Everyone's watching. I'll own you. I'll sue you for everything you have, which probably isn't much, but still." He was talking too fast now, words tumbling over each other. Fear disguised as aggression. Everyone in the coffee shop could hear it. Henry took one step forward. Just one. Clinton instinctively took one step back, his body reacting before his conscious mind could catch up. The entire coffee shop held its breath. Someone's coffee cup stopped halfway to their mouth. The espresso machine had gone quiet. Even the traffic outside seemed to have paused. Henry moved. Not fast, not slow, just inevitable, like a wave reaching shore. His right hand extended, and before Clinton could process what was happening, before he could flinch or dodge or raise his own hands in defense, Henry had gripped his wrist. Not a grab, not a clutch, a lock. His fingers found the exact pressure point between the radius and ulna, the place where every nerve ending converged. His thumb settled against the back of Clinton's hand with surgical precision. The angle was perfect. The positioning textbook, the control absolute. Clinton tried to pull away, and found he could not move. His wrist was trapped in a grip that felt less like human contact, and more like his arm had been placed in a mechanical vice. He pulled harder, panic rising, and pain shot up his forearm like electricity. "Let go," Clinton said, his voice rising, fear bleeding through every syllable. "Let go of me right now. This is assault. I'm going to have you arrested." Henry did not let go. Instead, with the same mechanical calm, he applied exactly 6 pounds of pressure in exactly the right direction. It was a joint lock he had taught 100 soldiers, demonstrated on training mats across 3 continents, refined through years of practice until it became as natural as breathing. Clinton's knees buckled. Not from pain, though there was pain, but from a fundamental biomechanical reality. When a joint is locked at precisely the correct angle, with exactly the right amount of force, the body has no choice but to follow the direction of least resistance. He went down like a marionette with cut strings. First the knees, then the whole body crumpling. And suddenly Clinton Hayes, who had walked into this coffee shop feeling like a king, was on his knees on the floor, still trapped in that inexorable grip. It took less than 3 seconds. One move. One. That was all it took. One economical, precise, completely controlled movement. Clinton was on his knees on the coffee shop floor, his wrist still locked in Henry's grip, his face pale with shock. The crumpled drawing had fallen from his other hand. The entire room was frozen. The phone that had been recording was now pointed at the floor, its owner too stunned to maintain the angle. The barista had one hand on the counter, mouth open. A woman near the door had spilled her latte across her laptop and did not notice. Henry looked down at Clinton. His face showed nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. Just that same mechanical calm. "You don't understand what you were doing," Henry said quietly. "That's my daughter's drawing. That's the most important thing in my life. You can insult me every day, until I die, and I will take it. But you don't touch anything that belongs to her." He released Clinton's wrist and stepped back. Clinton scrambled away, cradling his arm, his face red with humiliation and genuine fear. Henry bent down and picked up the crumpled drawing. He smoothed it carefully, tenderly, and slipped it back into his jacket pocket. Then he sat down at his table as if nothing had happened. The silence stretched. No one knew what to do. This was not how these situations resolved. The victim was not supposed to win, especially not like that. Especially not without violence, without shouting, without losing control. It had been elegant, surgical, and absolutely terrifying in its efficiency. The shop manager rushed over, her voice shaking. "I'm calling the police. Everyone, please stay calm." Henry nodded once. "That's fine." Clinton, still on the floor, found his voice. "He attacked me. Did you see that? He assaulted me. I want him arrested." But his words rang hollow. Because everyone had seen. The phones had recorded everything. The witnesses had clear lines of sight. And what they had seen was not an attack. It was self-defense against someone who had been harassing a man for months, who had stolen personal property, who had created a hostile situation. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers, one older and one young, both looking tired of domestic disturbances at coffee shops. Clinton rushed them, still holding his wrist dramatically. "Officer, that man attacked me. I want to press charges. He's dangerous." The older officer looked at Henry, who sat perfectly still, hands visible on the table, posture non-threatening. Recognition flickered across the officer's face. Not personal recognition, but professional recognition. The way law enforcement identifies someone with training. "Sir," the officer said to Henry, "would you mind coming outside to answer some questions?" "Of course," Henry said quietly. He stood, collected his backpack, and walked calmly toward the door. As he passed the officer, the younger one said, "Sir, I need to see your ID." Henry handed it over without comment. The officer studied it, then looked up sharply. "Henry Caldwell? Former military?" "Yes, sir." The officer's entire demeanor changed. He glanced at his partner, then back at Henry with something that looked like respect. Meanwhile, the shop manager was showing them the security footage. The witness statements started coming in, unprompted. The barista explained the months of harassment. A college student showed the recording on her phone, which clearly showed Clinton stealing the drawing and Henry responding with minimal force. An elderly man spoke up about Clinton's pattern of bullying behavior. The narrative was shifting. Rapidly. Inexorably. Clinton saw it happening, and his voice grew more desperate. "He's lying. He's trained to kill people. He could have killed me. He's dangerous." The older officer turned to him with barely concealed disgust. "Sir, the footage shows you stole his property and taunted him. He restrained you using minimal force and immediately released you when you dropped the item. That's textbook self-defense. Now I suggest you calm down before I consider charging you with filing a false report." Clinton's face went purple. "This is ridiculous. I am a respected professional. I work for Hammond Pharmaceuticals. You can't treat me like this." "I can treat you however the law requires," the officer said flatly. He turned to Henry. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm going to need a full statement, but based on what I'm seeing, you acted within your rights. You're not being detained." As the officer was speaking, his radio crackled. He stepped away to answer it, then returned with a strange expression. "Mr. Caldwell, I ran your name. You've got quite a record. Honorable discharge. Commendations. Civilian medals for training law enforcement in defensive tactics after you left service." Henry said nothing. The officer continued. "I actually know Captain Morris at the downtown precinct. Pretty sure he took one of your courses about 8 years back. Speaks very highly of you." The pieces were clicking together for everyone within earshot. This was not just some random guy. This was someone who had deliberately walked away from a position of strength, who had chosen silence and invisibility, who had endured months of abuse without once retaliating. Until someone threatened his daughter. Clinton's world was crumbling in real time. The people in the coffee shop who had watched his bullying with amusement or indifference were now looking at him with open contempt. His phone was buzzing with messages, his colleague group chat erupting because someone had already shared the video. The video was bad. Really bad. It showed Clinton, a large man in expensive clothes, harassing someone who looked half his size. Showed him stealing a child's drawing. Showed him getting controlled by a single move, and then lying about assault. The optics were catastrophic. Within hours it would have thousands of views. Hammond Pharmaceuticals' HR department would see it before lunch. By evening, there would be a statement about workplace conduct and company values. By the end of the week, Clinton Hayes would be unemployed. But in that moment, in the coffee shop, Clinton was just beginning to understand what he had done. He had mistaken kindness for weakness, silence for surrender, restraint for inability. He had pushed and pushed and pushed until he found the absolute limit, and the consequences were swift and merciless. The younger officer was taking statements from witnesses. Every single person confirmed the same story. Months of harassment, today's escalation, Henry's minimal response. Several people mentioned feeling ashamed they had not intervened sooner. Clinton tried one more time. "I want a lawyer. This is harassment." The older officer sighed. "Sir, you're not under arrest, but I strongly suggest you leave the premises. And I'd recommend you don't come back here." Clinton looked around wildly. No one would meet his eyes. The power he had wielded so casually was completely gone, evaporated like morning fog. He grabbed his jacket and stumbled toward the door, his exit captured by multiple phone cameras. As he passed Henry, he muttered something that might have been a threat, or might have been an apology. Henry did not acknowledge him. He simply sat at his table, his daughter's drawing pressed flat against his palm, his face still and calm. The coffee shop slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. The barista brought Henry a fresh coffee on the house. People gave him space, but the quality of their attention had changed. Where before they had looked through him, now they looked at him with something approaching respect. The shop manager approached tentatively. "Mr. Caldwell, I owe you an apology. I should have stopped that man weeks ago. I didn't know how to handle it. I'm sorry." Henry looked up at her. His eyes were tired. "It's not your fault. Is there anything we can do? Just let me sit here sometimes. That's all I need." She nodded, blinking back tears, and walked away. Over the next few days, the story spread through the neighborhood. The video went viral in local circles, shared with captions about standing up to bullies, about quiet strength, about how we never know what people are carrying. Some versions were exaggerated, turning Henry into an action hero. He hated those. Hammond Pharmaceuticals released a statement terminating Clinton Hayes for conduct unbecoming of company values. Clinton tried to sue, but his lawyers quietly advised him to let it go. The evidence was overwhelming. His reputation was destroyed. A few local parents recognized Henry from the video and thanked him for showing their kids what real strength looked like. He found this deeply uncomfortable and deflected their praise. The police never filed charges against anyone. The case was closed as a mutual disturbance with insufficient evidence for prosecution, though everyone knew Henry could have pressed harassment charges if he wanted. He did not want. What Henry wanted was to go back to invisible. But that was no longer possible. The coffee shop regulars knew now. They knew he was not helpless. They knew he had chosen restraint. And somehow, that knowledge changed everything. 2 weeks after the incident, Louisa was waiting outside her school as usual, clutching her backpack with both hands. Henry was 3 minutes early, holding the paper bag with one slightly stale croissant. She ran to him, and he lifted her up in the same effortless motion he always did. But this time, she pulled back and looked at him seriously. "Daddy, kids at school saw a video. They said you beat up a mean man." Henry's heart sank. He had hoped she would not hear about it. "I didn't beat anyone up, sweetheart. I just stopped someone from being mean. Were you scared?" He considered lying, then decided on truth. "A little, but I knew I had to protect something important." "My drawing? Your drawing." She hugged him fiercely. "You really are the strongest, Daddy." He closed his eyes and held her close. "Strength isn't about fighting, Lou. It's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. It's about choosing to be kind, even when people are cruel. That's the hardest kind of strong." She nodded against his shoulder, not fully understanding but trusting him completely. They walked home together, his hand in hers, and for the first time in 3 years, Henry felt something shift inside his chest. Not pride exactly, but perhaps the beginning of forgiveness. For himself. For the man he had been. For the choices he had made, and the person he had become. That night he took out Louisa's drawing and smoothed it one more time. The creases would not come out completely, but he carefully flattened it and slipped it into a small frame he had bought at the dollar store. He hung it above the kitchen table in their tiny apartment, where they could both see it every morning. Louisa noticed immediately. "It's like a museum, Daddy." "It is," he said softly. "Because some things are worth protecting. Some things are worth everything." She smiled and reached for his hand. And in that moment, in that cheap apartment with the broken heating and the stained carpet, Henry Caldwell understood something crucial. He had not lost his strength when Rachel died. He had not become less when he chose invisibility. He had simply learned a different kind of power. The power to endure. To sacrifice. To love something more than he feared loss. And when the moment came, when the only thing that mattered was threatened, that strength had been there waiting. Patient. Disciplined. Exactly enough. The weeks turned into months. Clinton Hayes moved to a different city, trying to rebuild a career that had been fundamentally damaged. Henry stayed in Riverside, returning to his corner table at the coffee shop, still ordering the same drink, still quiet. But he was not invisible anymore. People nodded to him now. The barista knew his name. Other parents from Louisa's school would occasionally join him for coffee, sharing comfortable silence or easy conversation. He found himself volunteering at the community center, teaching basic self-defense to anyone who wanted to learn. Not because he wanted to fight, but because he understood now that strength shared was strength multiplied. That the power to protect yourself gave you the freedom to be gentle. That real courage was not about dominance but about boundaries. Louisa thrived. She made friends easily, her confidence growing as she watched her father move through the world with quiet dignity. She drew more pictures, filling their apartment with color and life. And sometimes, late at night when she was asleep, Henry would stand by her bedroom door and watch her breathe. He would remember Rachel, the choice she had asked him to make, the promise he had kept. He would think about the man he had been, the man he had become, and the man he was still learning to be. He had learned that strength was not about never falling. It was about choosing, every single day, to stand back up. To be kind in a cruel world. To protect what mattered without becoming what you hated. To be invisible when necessary, and to be seen when it counted. The drawing stayed on the wall, permanent and honored. A reminder that some things are worth everything. That love is the strongest force. That one quiet man in a coffee shop could change the world, one small act of courage at a time.